Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be jumping into 1 John chapter 3. It's a chapter that grapples with some pretty big questions about what it means to live as a Christian.
You know, it's interesting. This chapter is often described as a letter from a spiritual mentor.
Mm.
Like, we're getting advice straight from John himself.
Yeah, it's pretty personal. And right off the bat, in verse 1, John just throws out this huge statement. See what kind of love the Father has given to us that we should be called children of God, and so we are. Whoa, hold on. You, me, like actually connected to the Creator? That's a radical concept.
Totally. And you have to think about it back then, in the ancient world. Being someone's child wasn't just about biology. It was about family. You shared their inheritance, their identity, everything.
Okay, so when John's saying we're God's children, he's not just talking about God, like, generally loving us, right? He's saying we're brought into this super close relationship, this divine family.
It's mind-blowing. And then it gets even wilder. Just a bit later, John says, "Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is." So we're getting this sneak peek, right? We will be like Christ.
Oh man, every time I read that verse, I get chills. But here's the thing that I always find interesting. John doesn't stop there with this amazing identity. He goes right into action. Everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself as he is pure.
Really important point. This gift, this amazing gift of being God's child, it's not passive. We have to live it out, become more like Christ.
I see it. It's like belonging, right? You're part of a new family now, a whole different way of living. And that leads us to this idea of righteousness and sin, which John gets into starting around verse 4.
This is where people sometimes trip up a bit. John uses some strong words like sin is lawlessness. It's all about aligning your life with God, hitting the bullseye. But when we sin, we miss the mark. We go our own way.
That's a great way to put it, that bullseye analogy. But I gotta admit, I always struggle with verse 6 a little bit. No one who abides in him keeps on sinning. No one who keeps on sinning has either seen him or known him. But, doesn't that kind of go against the idea that, well, we all mess up, even as Christians?
That's where understanding this whole abiding thing is key. It's not about being perfect overnight. Think about it like being connected to Wi-Fi. When you're connected, you've got access to everything, right? Same with Christ. Abiding lets his power and love flow through us.
So it's not so much about never sinning, but more about this constant connection with Jesus, letting his grace and power change us.
Exactly. It's about getting closer to the source. And this idea, it really changes how we see the difference between, well, those who are with God and those who aren't. John gets pretty serious. In verse 10, he says, "By this it is evident who are the children of God and who are the children of the devil. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not a God, nor is the one who does not love his brother."
Wow, okay, strong words. Children of God versus children of the devil. But is he really saying there are only two types of people?
Well, remember, John's writing to a specific group who are dealing with some tough stuff. It's not about being judgmental, it's about understanding. Like, ultimately, there are these two spiritual forces at work.
Okay, so less about labeling people, more about, like, where's your allegiance? Who are you following?
Exactly. And John gives us this really important clue about that. It's not just about what we do, it's about love.
Yeah, verse 10 specifically says, whoever doesn't love their brother, not of God. But what does that mean? Love here, it feels like more than just a feeling.
You got it. John's talking about love that moves, acts.
Yeah.
Selfless, sacrificial love. It's about what you do, not just what you say.
It's that love in action, right? Putting others first, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something.
You got it.
Yeah.
And the best example, well, it's Jesus. John says it right there in verse 16. "By this we know love, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brothers."
Man, that's powerful. He didn't just talk about love, he lived it all the way. It's like, that's the standard.
And that standard, well, it's for us too. John's clear about that. We got to follow in those footsteps.
Yeah.
Sacrifice. Put others first.
That's a challenge, that's for sure. But I think John gives us this really helpful example. He brings up Cain and Abel, remember? Do not be like Cain, who belonged to the evil one and murdered his brother. And why did he murder him? Because his own works were evil and his brother's righteous.
It gets to the heart of it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It wasn't just some random violence, right? It was a heart that was far from God.
Yeah.
Jealousy, selfishness.
And Abel, well, he lived a life that pleased God. It's about what's inside, not just what we do. Are we acting out of love or, out for ourselves?
That's the question. And John brings it home, like right into our lives in verse 17. He says, "If anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him?"
Oof, that one always hits me hard. It's like he's holding up a mirror, Are you really living this love out? So easy to talk about it, but are we actually doing something?
Yeah, and look at this specific example. Sees his brother in need. Could be money, emotional support, practical help. The point is, are we willing to open up, sacrifice, get uncomfortable?
Not always easy, but it's also encouraging, I think, because John doesn't just leave us wondering, am I doing enough? He gives us a way to know, a way to see if God's love is really in us. He talks about our conscience.
Super important. Verse 20, John says, if our heart condemns us, God is greater than our heart and he knows everything. It's like he's acknowledging those moments, right? The doubt, the feeling like we're not good enough.
We've all been there, but here's the amazing thing. Even when we feel like that, condemned, God sees something else. He knows us. He knows our struggles. And his love, it doesn't change.
It's that love that gives us the confidence to come to him, right? Confess, get forgiveness. John goes on, beloved, if our heart does not condemn us, we have confidence before God.
So it's not about being perfect then. It's about a heart that's open to God, honest about our mess-ups, ready to receive grace.
That's the beauty of it. God's grace. It's not about how good we are. It's a gift because of Jesus. And when we get that, it changes how we live, how we follow his commands.
And that circles us right back to the main theme here, love. John reminds us, and this is his commandment, that we believe in the name of his Son, Jesus Christ, and love one another just as he has commanded us.
Not just one of many, right? Love is the foundation. It's the proof. It's the Spirit working in us.
And we don't have to do it alone. We stay connected to the vine, to Christ, and his love flows through. We love like he loved.
That's the amazing thing about this whole Christian life, isn't it? It's not about trying harder. It's about getting closer to the source. And then, well, his love changes us, makes us more like him.
So 1 John 3, it paints this picture of what it means to be God's child.
Transformed by love, yeah. Empowered to live right, to do what's good, and called to, well, to put that love into action.
Yeah, it's not like we're trying to get on God's good side, you know. It's about responding to the love he's already shown us.
In that response, I mean, it just naturally flows out in love for others. It's not about following rules or checking off a list.
Right. It's about being like Christ, reflecting his love in everything we do.
It's a high calling, but it's freeing too, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so.
Well, because we don't have to be perfect on our own strength.
Yeah.
We've got the Holy Spirit with us, guiding us, empowering us, like actually enabling us to love like Christ loved.
It's both encouraging and challenging, this chapter.
Totally. It reminds us we're not alone. We're part of this, like this family, a community, trying to figure out this radical love thing.
And it pushes us too, right? To go beyond just talk, to look at our own hearts and ask, okay, how am I showing God's love? For real.
That's the question, the one that sticks with you. How are we living this out? It should change our thinking, our decisions, you know, how we treat people.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into 1 John 3, one last thought to leave you with. If love really is the measure of our faith, how are you going to show that love today?
Maybe it's reaching out to someone who's hurting, helping a neighbor out, or just being kind to the people you meet.
Whatever it looks like for you, remember, love's not just a feeling, it's what we do. It's a choice every single day.
And as you head back out into the world, well, may you be filled with God's love, and may that love just overflow into everything you do.